Yeah.
Does that indicate you might have to spend more than the $2 billion through this process? And then can I ask you a China one as well?
Well, just let me deal with bushfires first. I'm pleased that we've been able to get so much support out so quickly, whether it's been particularly those small business programs of over $200 million, and to be able to learn the lessons early and to be able to change the program and deliver. And I want to thank those on the ground who gave us a lot of good feedback on how to get that program right. Whether we need to commit more, well, we'll happily receive submissions from the Minister. I said that we'll spend what it takes to get these communities back on their feet. $2 billion at this point is proving to be very comprehensive, and as I said, there's another $500 million already by the 30th of June, which has gone out in those disaster recovery payments, and we expect that to continue as well. So we will spend well more than $2 billion, and I suspect we'll sooner spend it earlier than we'd anticipated, and that's just a sign that we're being more successful in connecting people up to the programs. But we are very open to that, Phil. But on the other matter.
Yeah. The draft decision by the Chinese to impose the tariffs on barley, do you see that as retribution for for us pushing for the review into the outbreak of the virus?
No, I don't. This is a program that's been going on for 18 months. This review, it's been a subject that I've raised at various meetings that I've had with the Chinese leadership, including Premier Li Keqiang last year. It's been an ongoing issue between our two countries, and we have seen the level of trade of barley into China fall from 1.7 billion down to 600 million. So I think it would be. I think we have to be careful not to draw lines between these two things. We would expect and hope that this issue will be determined on its merits. It's an anti-dumping issue from the Chinese perspective. They certainly haven't raised it as connected to any other issues, and I'd be extremely disappointed if it was. But there's no reason for me to think, based on the way that they're approaching it, that I could draw that conclusion. It's important that we just deal with this on its merits, as we have been for some time now. We believe that trade is incredibly important and beneficial for both countries. Anti-dumping regimes we respect. We have anti-dumping regimes here. We have had anti-dumping inquiries in relation to Chinese products into Australia, and not all of those decisions have been well received. But they've been made on the merits, and I would hope and expect that China would do the same thing.
Just on the opposition has been talking again about JobKeeper.
Why don't we just do a few bushfires? If there's questions on bushfires, happy to do that, and I'm happy to come back to all the other issues that are out there, Lani.
Prime Minister, there have been reports this morning that the original lot of money in relation to the bushfires was not getting out and getting into bank accounts quick enough. Will you commit to that occurring? And just on another issue in relation to JobKeeper, there have been calls this morning for that to be extended post the current time.
Still with the bushfires, Andrew, did you want to speak to the issue of the timing? I mean, what we've said today is that we thought we'd get 500 million out, and we'll have got more than $1 billion out. So I think that addresses that. And significantly on the basis of the changes that were made to programs. But when it came to the disaster recovery payments, those are the payments made to individuals, those immediate cash support. I mean, that was going out with those who were connected to the real-time payment system within half an hour. So some of that support was going out in record time. Others, particularly on small business, there were issues with that. That's why we changed the program. But Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the question. Look, we're working very hard to make sure there is no blockage, and there are no blockages to how this money rolls out, and we are finding that the money is getting into individuals and businesses' pockets very quickly. Over 18,000 businesses now have had money, and in some instances that has been less than a 24-hour turnaround from the point of application. In fact, of that 17,400 businesses that have received the $10,000 grant, there's only been about 17,000 applications. So it's a small amount that haven't received it, and I'm sure they will receive it very shortly. So money is flowing. Over 260,000 individuals have received the DRA and the DRP. We know that there's just over 1,500, I think 1,700 farmers have received the primary producer grants. So money is flowing. Now, of course, what we do is every time we hear about an individual or a business that for whatever reason is struggling to get themselves through the process, we take those cases up individually, and that's why we've adjusted the programs as well. The Prime Minister's talked about adjusting the small business program. We've adjusted all of the programs to make sure that the policy intent is being reached. So we're happy to take on individual cases and look at at it, but I think money is flowing quite well.
I'll come back to that.
Some of the people in these communities have been living surrounded by rubble and debris for months now. Who do you blame for that?
This has been a very difficult program, I think, for the states to roll out, and Andrew again might want to comment on this. I referred to it earlier. They're about a third of the way through now, and we're funding half of the project, but the project is actually run by the states and territories, and the Commonwealth doesn't run those projects. And I'm pleased to learn also in the briefs that I've received that more than half, well over half that workforce that is actually doing the clean-up work is actually local contractors and suppliers as well. And I welcome that as well, because part of the rebuilding process is also aiding in the economic recovery process on the ground as well, and I really welcome that. The early phases in dealing with some of the OH&S issues, asbestos issues, they had to be worked through, and they have been worked through, and now a third of the way through the program. As I said, South Australia is almost done. New South Wales will be done by the end of June, and Victoria by August. But Andrew?
Yeah, Pam, I think the states are doing a remarkable job of trying to clean up as many sites as they can quickly. Yes, it took a little bit of time at the start, but I think we also need to recognise that I've visited many of these sites, many of these locations. It's not always a nice, flat suburban area that they're trying to clean up. A lot of these are rural properties. A lot of them are on very inaccessible land. And we know asbestos and other contaminants are an issue. I think things are moving very quickly now, and anyone who is living who is displaced or who is still living in a tent, I've heard situations like that. The states are working very hard to make sure that they're not, and I know that every person who has been displaced from their home has been given the offer of temporary accommodation.
The rate at which the states have been moving.
A whole of government response to a question on notice released this morning stated that only $538 million has been released from the $2 billion bushfire recovery fund. So what is the rest of that money making up to the $1 billion? And within that question on notice, it wasn't just demand-driven service programs that hadn't got the money out of the door. Things like rural financial counsellors had zero money released so far, and that's not entirely demand-driven. Where's the billion coming from?
I can tell you, it's in rural financial counselling, it's in childcare subsidies, it's in mental health for school communities, it's in wildlife and habitat recovery, it's in international surge support, it's in tourism, but a large part of what is still to come, it relates to the payments to the states for the site cleanups. Those items will be billed separately, and they are hundreds of millions of dollars. And so what you're seeing already and what's actually being paid out and is expected to be paid out shortly is across all the areas that I referred to before. As I said, we will have got out the door twice what we anticipated doing back in January, and that is due to the great work of the Bushfire Recovery Agency connecting with local communities. And one of the most significant elements of that has been getting that $170 million to small businesses in $10,000 grants, which has been a real game changer for them.
Prime Minister, 2 months ago you insisted to us that if you shut down, it had to be for 6 months. That was the only way that you could squash the virus. How did you get that wrong? And can you confirm that the Treasury review into JobKeeper will assess whether to truncate or alter the program before September, given restrictions are being lifted?
Well, Andrew, I don't share your certainty about the future that you seem to profess about how the coronavirus operates. We still have a long way to go on this, and I think it's quite dangerous, I think, to assert that this is all over, as your question suggests. And so I wouldn't agree with your assessment. We've still got a long way to go. We are just now starting to reopen our economy. We are not fully certain about what the implications of all of that will be, and that's why we have to remain on our guard. And that's why the states are moving at their own pace to implement the roadmap that I set out last week. And we will come under test again with the protections that we have put in place. So I would not be so overconfident as you when it comes to where things are at. I think Australians have to remain on their guard, and I think the Chief Medical Officer was stressing this point yesterday. The reason that we're opening things up again is not because the virus is beaten. The virus is still out there. It hasn't gone anywhere. It is still out there. There may be only 700 or so active cases in Australia now, but Australia is still very much at risk. The reason we're reopening is we've put protections in place, and it'll take us some time to reopen our economy and get it back to a point where it can start supporting Australians again. And so I wouldn't share your assessment of the scene several months ago. We have put in place and bought 6 months' worth of time. We are only 6 weeks into that 6 months. And we've put the commitment in to support Australians over that period of time. And as we need to adjust based on advice and the strength of the economy and how many people we're getting back into jobs, well, these are the things we'll be watching carefully. But I don't think Australians can be in any doubt that when they needed us most, we were there. And we're there for them right here, right now, and we'll be there for them in the future.
Prime Minister, would you consider scaling back JobKeeper or ending it before the end of September?
All of this is very premature. We are 6 weeks into a 6-month program. And the impact of the virus, how it will impact on Australia in the months ahead with a reopening economy, is very much a work in progress. That's why we've put this 6-month lifeline in place. And what we need to ensure that we do is that whatever supports we have, that they are targeted. I set this out in early March. In early March, I said we had to have programs that were targeted. We had to have programs that used existing distribution mechanisms within the government. We have been doing all of these things. And all of our programs will continue to be delivered in accordance with those principles. But let there be no doubt, Australians know that our government has been there to back them through one of the toughest times in their lives, not just on COVID-19, bushfires, on drought, on floods. We've been there to support them, and we will continue to be there to support them.
Prime Minister, the Audit Office has revealed that on the 26th of March 2019, your office asked Bridget McKenzie to seek your authority on projects to receive sports grants, and she wrote seeking that on the 10th of April. So why did you mislead the House of Representatives when you said that no authorisation was provided by you, and why did your office do that if you had no role in authorising them?
It's good to see that the Canberra Press Gallery is back to politics as usual with Parliament coming back. Yeah, thank you. I've answered your question. I said no.
Question. He asked her about potentially ending the JobKeeper scheme early. Would you also be open to, as Deloitte has called for, a staging at the ending of it that would be longer than the 6-month time limit you have if unemployment is still at very, very high levels, by the end of the year?
I think it's very... we've got to be careful not to be speculative.
And that's where we farewell viewers in WA on the main
is,
channel. If you want to continue watching this, you can do so on the ABC News channel.
That supports people through an economic lifeline, an income support lifeline, to the tune of some $130 billion. And that doesn't include JobSeeker, which is many tens of billions on top of that. And this is what we're delivering to support Australians during this time. Now, how that program can be adjusted to better support over that period, or if there are sectors that come under greater strain over a longer period of time, these are all things that the government is fully aware of. But we are not going to get ahead of ourselves here. And I would encourage others not to get ahead of themselves here. We are 6 weeks into a 6-month program in one of the most uncertain economic and health environments any of us have ever seen. And so if you've got a crystal ball, you might want to share it with me. I don't have one. So we're going to make decisions based on the advice that we have and our reading of the economy. But right now, Australians need that support. Whether it's in a bushfire-affected community, a drought-affected community, or those who still aren't able to reopen their businesses because there's insufficient demand for them to do so. My focus is on what they need today, right here, right now. Chris.
It did begin, as you say, 18 months ago. It began after Australia banned Huawei from the 5G network and we brought in foreign interference laws. In that 18 months, has China sought any information from the Australian government at all on the level of subsidies that we might be giving? Have they sent out any investigations team? And if they haven't done any of those things, how can this be being decided on the merits of trade?
Well, at this stage, They are coming to a conclusion, I understand, sometime next week, I think, Chris, and so the Trade Minister will continue to facilitate any assistance they need on any of those things. But on the broader question, I think he dealt with that yesterday.
Is it a sense of a single inspector?
Well, the Trade Minister dealt with that yesterday.
The Trade Minister dealt with that yesterday.
So the answer is
he's privy to that. We're working as cooperatively, and the 19th of May we'll see that report. I don't think we should speculate or jump ahead. We're working to provide whatever information is required to ensure that our case is adequately prosecuted with the Chinese officials.
So what's your reaction to the scenes of protests on the streets in Melbourne and Sydney over the weekend, of people wanting things to open up sooner and that level of civil disobedience?
Well, I understand people's frustration, and I'm pleased to see that the Victorian Premier has made some decisions today, or prior to today, in terms of where they're going on the roadmap back, and I welcome that, as I do the announcements made in Western Australia and New South Wales and other places. The states, as we said last Friday, are setting out their timetable. An important part of what we decided last week is that people did need to see that road ahead, because we understand the frustrations of not knowing, well, what happens next and what happens after that. We were able to get ourselves to a position last Friday, a week ahead of where we thought we would, where we were in a position to do just that. So it is our hope that will provide...
Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ross Childs. Let's go back to Canberra now and to the Prime Minister.
Deal with, I think, the anxieties and frustrations that they're feeling. It's a free country. People will make their protest and make their voices heard, but equally that needs to be done in an appropriate way and needs to respect the law enforcement authorities who are just simply trying to do their job. So we understand it's a difficult time, and those issues will be dealt with in the normal way. Brett.
Might be wound back?
What I've said, I think, is very clear, is that we're 6 weeks into a 6-month program. And at this stage, the uncertainties about the global economy, let alone our own economy, are still very much there. And it would be very premature, I think, to get into speculations. What people know is there's 6 months of an economic lifeline to the value of $130 billion. And that says to Australians that we will be there for you. And we will be there for you to get Australians back into work. The thing that matters is getting Australians back into work. The thing that matters is getting Australian businesses back open. Because when that happens, there will be no need for those levels of income support. Success for our economy is when we're able to get ourselves out of the situation which requires such enormous taxpayer support. And it's not just today's taxpayers, it's tomorrow's taxpayers as well. And our government will also always be extremely prudent into not putting burdens onto future generations, let alone the current generation, in dealing with the challenges that we have today. So that income support was forthcoming. It was forthcoming quickly and delivered with record speed when it comes to programs of this scale and this size. It was carefully considered. It wasn't rushed into. It was worked through. It was well designed, and it's been doing the job. And it will keep doing that job for as long as it's needed. And the test, ultimately, is ensuring that we get people back into jobs. If people are in jobs, they don't need income support. And that's my task. That's the state's task. That's all of our task, to support business. As I said on Friday, opening up was step 3. Step 4 was building that confidence and building that momentum. Step 5 was that reset, which went to the broader policy issues that would see our economy grow into the future so we can pay back the debt and we can continue to guarantee the essential services that Australians rely on. So that's what we're focused on, right here, right now. Thanks very much.